The ongoing war in Ukraine, a conflict that erupted in 2014 and escalated dramatically in 2022, is deeply rooted in historical, political, and cultural factors. The immediate trigger was Russia's full-scale invasion, but the roots run deeper. Russia and Ukraine share centuries of history, but have divergent aspirations. At the heart of this conflict is a disagreement over Ukraine's place in the world. Russia views Ukraine as part of its historical sphere, linked by cultural and religious ties. Ukraine seeks its own path as a sovereign nation integrated with Europe. This divergence, coupled with NATO's expansion, ignited the conflict. Understanding the historical context and key events is crucial for navigating the challenges ahead. The historical ties between Russia and Ukraine are long and intricate, dating back to the medieval kingdom of Kievan Rus. This East Slavic state, which flourished from the 9th to the 13th centuries, is considered the common ancestor of both modern-day Russia and Ukraine. Kievan Rus' left an indelible mark on the cultural and religious identity of both nations, laying the foundation for the close ties that would bind them for centuries to come. However, the historical narrative becomes more complex as we move into the early modern period. While the territory of present-day Ukraine became increasingly integrated into the Russian Empire, Ukrainian national identity began to emerge, fueled by a distinct language, culture, and historical memory. This nascent national consciousness, though often suppressed, would continue to simmer beneath the surface, periodically erupting in movements for autonomy and self-determination. The tumultuous 20th century saw Ukraine caught in the crosscurrents of revolution, war, and competing imperial ambitions. After a brief period of independence following the Russian Revolution, Ukraine was forcibly incorporated into the Soviet Union as the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. This period was marked by both attempts at Ukrainian cultural revival and brutal repression, most notably the Holodomor, a man-made famine engineered by Stalin's regime in the 1930s that killed millions of Ukrainians. Despite the hardships endured under Soviet rule, Ukraine emerged as a distinct republic within the USSR, with its own language, culture, and a growing sense of national identity. This legacy would prove crucial in shaping Ukraine's path after the collapse of the Soviet Empire in 1991. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked a watershed moment for Ukraine. After decades of Soviet rule, Ukraine declared its independence, embarking on a new chapter in its history. This newfound independence, however, came with its own set of challenges, as Ukraine grappled with defining its national identity, building a democratic society, and navigating its relationship with its powerful neighbor to the east, Russia. Ukraine's post-Soviet journey has been marked by a delicate balancing act. On the one hand, there has been a concerted effort to forge a distinct Ukrainian identity, reclaiming the nation's history, language, and culture after decades of Soviet suppression. This has included promoting the Ukrainian language, rewriting history textbooks to reflect a Ukrainian perspective, and fostering a sense of national pride. On the other hand, Ukraine has also had to grapple with its complex relationship with Russia. Russia, under the leadership of Boris Yeltsin and later Vladimir Putin, has struggled to come to terms with the loss of its former empire, and has viewed Ukraine as a key element in its sphere of influence. This has led to attempts to exert political, economic, and cultural pressure on Ukraine, aiming to keep it within Russia's orbit. Ukraine's efforts to assert its independence and pursue closer ties with the West have been met with resistance from Russia, viewing these moves as a direct threat to its interests. This clash of visions, coupled with Russia's growing assertiveness on the world stage, set the stage for the escalating tensions that would ultimately erupt into open conflict. Section 4. The Shadow of NATO and EU Expansion. The end of the Cold War brought about a profound reshaping of the geopolitical landscape in Europe. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, NATO, the Western military alliance, began to expand eastward, incorporating former Soviet bloc countries into its fold. This expansion, while welcomed by many in Central and Eastern Europe as a guarantee of security against potential Russian aggression, was met with suspicion and resentment in Moscow. Russia, under the leadership of Vladimir Putin, viewed NATO expansion as a betrayal of Western promises and a direct threat to its security interests. Putin argued that the West had assured Russia that NATO would not expand eastward after the reunification of Germany, a claim disputed by Western leaders. Regardless of the historical accuracy, Russia's perception of being encircled by a hostile military alliance fueled its anxieties and contributed to a growing sense of insecurity. The European Union's eastward enlargement further exacerbated Russia's concerns. The EU's offer of economic integration and political cooperation proved attractive to many former Soviet republics, including Ukraine. Russia, however, saw the EU's expansion as a rival project, an attempt to peel away countries from its sphere of influence and integrate them into a Western-dominated order. The prospect of Ukraine, a country with deep historical ties to Russia and strategically located on its southwestern border, joining NATO and the EU, was particularly alarming for Moscow. Russia viewed such a move as a red line, a direct challenge to its core security interests, and a potential springboard for Western influence right on its doorstep. This perception, fueled by a mix of historical grievances, strategic calculations, and domestic political considerations, played a significant role in shaping Russia's increasingly assertive foreign policy towards Ukraine. Section 5. The Orange Revolution, a glimpse of change. The first major clash between Russia and the West over Ukraine's future came in 2004 with the Orange Revolution. This popular uprising was sparked by a fraudulent presidential election, widely seen as an attempt by Russia to install a pro-Moscow leader in Kyiv. The protests, which drew hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians to the streets, were a testament to the Ukrainian people's desire for a democratic and independent future, free from Russian interference. The Orange Revolution represented a significant setback for Russia's ambitions in Ukraine. The protests forced the annulment of the rigged election and led to the victory of Viktor Yushchenko, a pro-Western politician who advocated for closer ties with Europe. The Orange Revolution demonstrated the limits of Russia's influence in Ukraine and the growing appeal of Western values and institutions among the Ukrainian population. However, the Orange Revolution also exposed the fragility of Ukraine's democracy and the challenges it faced in consolidating its independence. The Yushchenko presidency was plagued by internal divisions, economic difficulties, and continued Russian pressure. Moreover, the Orange Revolution did little to address the underlying structural issues that made Ukraine vulnerable to external interference, such as corruption, weak institutions, and a divided society. Despite its shortcomings, the Orange Revolution marked a turning point in Ukraine's post-Soviet trajectory. It demonstrated the Ukrainian people's willingness to fight for their right to choose their own destiny and their aspiration for a democratic and European future. The Orange Revolution also served as a wake-up call for Russia, revealing the limits of its influence and the growing determination of Ukrainians to chart their own course. Section 6. Euromaidan, a nation's cry for freedom. The tensions that had been simmering since the Orange Revolution boiled over in 2013 with the Euromaidan protests. These demonstrations, which began in November 2013, were triggered by then-President Viktor Yanukovych's decision to abandon an association agreement with the European Union in favor of closer ties with Russia. This move, widely seen as a betrayal of Ukraine's European aspirations, sparked outrage among Ukrainians, who took to the streets in massive numbers to demand closer integration with Europe and an end to corruption and authoritarian rule. The Euromaidan protests quickly evolved into a broader movement for democratic change, challenging not only Yanukovych's pro-Russian policies, but also the systemic corruption and lack of accountability that plagued Ukraine's political system. The protests, which lasted for months, were met with a brutal crackdown by the Yanukovych regime, resulting in the deaths of over 100 protesters. Despite the violence and intimidation, the Euromaidan protesters remained defiant, their determination fueled by a deep-seated desire for freedom, dignity, and a European future for their country. The protests culminated in February 2014 with Yanukovych's ouster and the formation of a new government committed to democratic reforms and closer ties with the West. The Euromaidan Revolution, as it came to be known, was a watershed moment in Ukraine's post-Soviet history. It demonstrated the Ukrainian people's unwavering commitment to democracy their rejection of Russian interference, and their aspiration to be part of the European family. The Euromaidan Revolution also marked a turning point in Russia-Ukraine relations, setting the stage for the most dangerous confrontation between the two countries since the collapse of the Soviet Union.